They said I couldn't even spell university while I was pouring their tea. I stood there in my apron while they laughed at me like I was nothing. But last night, the President of the United States hugged me on live television. He looked into the camera and said, "This nation owes her everything." And those same people, they were watching, silent, eyes wide, mouths shut. I didn't say a word. I just stood tall. My name is Maya Ellison. When I was 19, I worked as a maid for the Lawrence family in Connecticut. They were rich, old money, big house with marble floors, white pillars, and a security gate that clicked every time you walked in. To them, I was just the help. That's what Mrs. Lawrence called me when she introduced me to her friends. Not Maya, not even young lady, just the help. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment with my little brother, Tyrese. He was only 9. Our mom passed away that spring. One minute, she was making pancakes in the kitchen. The next, she collapsed on the floor. Heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. She was only 42. From that day on, I became everything for Tyrese. His sister, his mother, his protector. I dropped out of school to find a job fast, and the Lawrences were the only ones hiring without a diploma. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., make Tyrese breakfast, walk him to school, then take the bus across town to clean up after people who never once said thank you. I scrubbed floors with bleach until my fingers cracked. I ironed tablecloths that cost more than my rent. I learned how to serve tea exactly the way Mrs. Lawrence liked it. 1 cube of sugar, lemon on the side, never stirred. I memorized every detail because mistakes got me docked pay. Their daughter, Ashley, was a year older than me. Their son, Matthew, was in college. I'd serve them drinks when they had friends over. Once, I overheard them laughing in the living room. Ashley said, "She actually thinks she can go to college." Matthew laughed. "She can't even spell university." I was standing behind the curtain, holding a silver tray with their teacups. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. My ears burned and my chest felt tight, but I kept standing straight because I needed that job. I needed to pay rent. I needed to buy Tyrese shoes for school. So I swallowed the shame and kept walking. But that night, when I got home, Tyrese was waiting for me with a drawing he made in school. It was a picture of me in a graduation cap. He wrote in messy handwriting, "My sister is going to be a doctor." I smiled, but inside, I wanted to cry. Not because of what the Lawrences said, but because part of me was starting to believe them. I had dreams once. I wanted to be a scientist. I used to read library books about computers and data and how things worked. But now I spent my days scrubbing dishes and picking up napkins off their fancy rugs. Still, Tyrese believed in me every single day. He'd say things like, "One day, you're gonna wear glasses and have your own office." Or, "When I grow up, I'm gonna work for you." His belief was stronger than my doubt. And so, every night, after I washed the last plate and folded his blanket on the couch, I sat in the kitchen with a notebook and tried to remember who I used to be before all of this. I wrote down the word university at the top of the page. I spelled it wrong 3 times, but I didn't stop because deep down, something had started to wake up inside me. Something the Lawrences didn't see. Something even I had almost forgotten. I wasn't just the help. I was someone's whole world. And maybe, just maybe, I still had a chance to change everything. For a while, I thought just holding on was enough. I told myself I didn't need to dream anymore, that surviving was its own kind of strength. But the truth was, I was running on fumes. I worked 6 days a week at the Lawrences' house and sometimes picked up night shifts, cleaning offices just to cover rent and groceries. I was always tired, always chasing time. I'd fall asleep sitting up on the bus or with my shoes still on at home. I'd wake up to Tyrese gently pulling off my socks or covering me with his little Spider-Man blanket. Then came the night everything cracked wide open. It was a Saturday. The Lawrences were hosting a dinner party, the kind with string quartets and wine I couldn't pronounce. I had been rushing back and forth from the kitchen, carrying trays, refilling glasses, making sure everything looked perfect. Ashley was showing off in front of her college friends, and Matthew was being loud and obnoxious, like always. At one point, he got up, laughing about something, and knocked over his wine glass. The red liquid spilled all over the white tablecloth and down onto the carpet. Everyone turned to look at me. Mrs. Lawrence didn't even blink. "Clean it up, Maya. Quickly." I grabbed a towel and did what I was told, even though it wasn't my fault. As I was scrubbing the rug, I heard Matthew mutter just loud enough for everyone to hear, "If she were any slower, we'd have to hire her replacement before dessert." Laughter broke out across the table. I kept my head down, but something in me snapped. Not loudly, not in a way anyone could see. It was quiet, like a thread snapping in the back of my mind. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. But when I got home that night, I sat on the floor of our kitchen and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. Tyrese was already asleep, curled up with his stuffed bear. I could hear his soft breathing, that gentle rhythm that always reminded me I had a reason to keep going. But I also knew that if I didn't change something soon, I was going to lose myself completely. My body was tired, my heart was tired, and my spirit? It was hanging by a thread. That's when I remembered something I had heard about: online GED programs. It was late, past midnight, but I opened my cracked phone and started searching. Most of the sites looked shady or expensive, but after a few tries, I found one that was real, affordable, and flexible enough that I could study after work. My hands were shaking when I signed up, not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in years: hope. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Tyrese. I didn't want to say it out loud in case it all fell apart. I started studying late at night, after I'd cooked dinner, helped Tyrese with homework, and finished the laundry. Some nights I barely slept. I'd be halfway through a lesson when my head would nod forward and the screen would go blurry. But I kept going. Every word I learned, every math problem I solved, felt like a small rebellion, like I was stealing back the life I was supposed to have. But it wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to quit. Days when I failed a quiz and felt stupid all over again. Days when Mrs. Lawrence piled on extra chores or gave me that cold smile that meant I wasn't doing enough. And then there was the morning I collapsed on the bus from exhaustion. I woke up to a woman tapping my shoulder gently. Her name was Mrs. Donahue. She was a retired school teacher who recognized the GED logo on my notebook and asked if I needed help. At first, I was embarrassed, but she was kind. She invited me to her home on Sundays, offered me tea, and helped me understand the parts I struggled with: fractions, grammar, writing essays. She never treated me like I was dumb. She listened, she cared, and for the first time in years, I had someone other than Tyrese who believed in me. Meanwhile, things at home were still hard. The rent kept going up. Tyrese got in trouble at school for snapping at a teacher who made a rude comment about his clothes. I was falling behind on bills, and every time the phone rang, I expected it to be someone asking for money. I was one broken appliance or missed paycheck away from losing everything, but I held on, even tighter than before, because now I had a goal. The Lawrences didn't notice the change in me. They still saw the same maid, walking in with her head down, wiping counters, folding napkins, just so. But inside, I was changing. Every night I studied, every chapter I finished, added one more brick to the foundation I was building beneath my feet. I knew the world wasn't going to make it easy. I was a black girl without a degree, working minimum wage jobs with no family connections and no savings. But I had something they didn't expect. I had grit. I had a little brother who believed I could do anything. And now, I had a fire that their laughter couldn't put out. This was the beginning of something. I didn't know what it would lead to yet, but I knew I wasn't going to stay a maid forever. I was done being invisible. I was done being small. The next time someone laughed at me, they were going to choke on it. because I wasn't just getting my GED, I was getting my life back. The day my GED results came in, I didn't open the email right away. I stared at my phone for almost an hour, my thumb hovering over the screen. I was scared, not of failure exactly, but of what it would mean if I actually passed. For so long, I had worn struggle like a second skin. What would it mean to shed that? To step into something bigger? But when I finally opened it and saw the word pass, my heart skipped a beat. I let out this shaky laugh, half joy, half disbelief, and then I screamed so loud, Tyrese came running in thinking something was wrong. I scooped him up and spun him around in our tiny kitchen. I did it, I whispered in his ear. I passed. He smiled so wide I thought his face would split in half. That night, we had a celebration, just the two of us. We made peanut butter sandwiches and danced in our socks. We didn't have much, but we had that moment, and I'll never forget it. But passing the GED wasn't the finish line. It was just the door finally opening. Now I had to figure out how to walk through it. I started looking into colleges, not the fancy ones with ivy on the walls, but community colleges with night classes and flexible schedules. I knew I couldn't stop working. Tyrese still needed me. The bills didn't go away. But I also knew that if I didn't take the next step now, I might never do it. I applied to 3 schools, got rejected by 2. The third, Milltown Community College, offered me a spot, but only if I could pay for tuition up front. My stomach dropped. The cost wasn't huge by most standards, but for me, it was impossible. I had $47 in my savings account, but I didn't give up. I remembered what Mrs. Donahue had said. Sometimes the money comes after the decision. Sometimes life tests how bad you really want it. So I applied for every scholarship I could find. I stayed up late writing essays on my cracked laptop, describing my story over and over. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told the truth about being a maid, about losing my mom, about raising my brother. I didn't know if it was enough, but a few weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail with a gold seal. I opened it with shaking hands. Congratulations. You've been awarded the Second Chance Women in Tech Scholarship. I sat down on the floor, holding the letter like it was made of glass. I had done it. Somehow, I was going to college. The first day of class was rough. I was older than most of the students. I felt out of place, with my thrift store jeans and secondhand backpack. But I showed up. I listened. I took notes like my life depended on it. And in a way, it did. This wasn't just about me. This was about Tyrese, about breaking a cycle, about proving to myself, and maybe to the Lawrences too, that I was more than a girl who poured their tea. Classes were hard, especially coding. I didn't know what half the words meant in the beginning, but I asked questions. I stayed after class. I watched YouTube tutorials late into the night, and slowly, things started to click. Meanwhile, I picked up extra night shifts at a local diner to cover what my scholarship didn't. I'd go straight from class to work, then home to help Tyrese with homework and make sure he had what he needed. I was always exhausted, but I felt alive for the first time in years. I was building something real, and Tyrese was changing too. He was proud. He told all his teachers, "My sister's in college. She's going to build computers and stuff." His eyes lit up when he talked about me. During my second semester, I joined a group project in one of my tech classes focused on ethical data use. That's where I discovered my real passion, data justice. We studied how facial recognition software was misidentifying people of color, leading to false arrests and unfair profiling. Something inside me clicked. This wasn't just numbers and code. This was real life. This was about people like me, people who got looked over, dismissed, blamed. I threw myself into the work. I started reading studies, attending virtual conferences, reaching out to researchers online. My professors noticed. One of them, Dr. Campos, pulled me aside one day after class and said, "You have something special. You don't just learn. You see." By the time I was ready to graduate, I had built a working prototype of a tool that detected racial bias in datasets used by facial recognition software. It was rough, still early, but it worked. Dr. Campos encouraged me to present it at a State Tech Expo. I didn't even own a blazer, but Mrs. Donahue bought me one from a thrift store and hemmed the sleeves. When I stood up there to present, I wasn't the maid anymore. I was a scholar, a builder, a voice. I explained how data could hurt people if we weren't careful, how invisible bias had visible consequences. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped, then another, then everyone. I had never felt that kind of validation in my life. Afterward, a representative from a nonprofit organization approached me. He handed me a card and said, "We've been looking for something like this. Would you consider working with us to develop it further?" I nodded, stunned. I wasn't just in the room. I was being invited to lead. That night, I walked home under the streetlights, the wind cold against my cheeks. I thought about every step it took to get here, every long night, every rude comment, every moment I almost gave up. And I realized something. I had turned pain into purpose. I had taken what they used to shame me and used it to build a future. And I was just getting started. The day of the National Symposium came faster than I expected. I was invited to speak about my algorithm, this small thing I had created in a corner of my bedroom, powered by an old laptop, late-night coffee, and stubborn hope. I still remember reading the invitation over and over again, like it was a mistake, but it wasn't. It was real. My project had gained attention for how it helped identify bias in facial recognition software, and now I was being asked to present it in front of top data scientists, legal experts, and government officials. The event was held in Washington, D.C. I had never been on a plane before. I had never even stayed in a hotel. When I stepped into the conference center, everything felt surreal. Marble floors, cameras everywhere, a sea of people in suits and name tags. For a moment, I felt small again, like the girl who once carried teacups in silence while others laughed behind her back. But then I looked down at my own name badge, Maya Ellison, keynote speaker. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and kept walking. Before my turn on stage, I stood behind the curtain, clutching my notes. I wasn't nervous about forgetting my lines. I was nervous about being seen, not just by strangers, but by the world, by the Lawrences, who were probably sitting comfortably in their mansion, flipping channels, by the kids who once whispered maid like it was an insult, by every teacher who gave up on me, every person who thought I didn't belong. When my name was called, the lights dimmed, and I walked onto the stage. The room was packed, thousands of eyes on me, but I found my focus. I began to speak, not like someone begging to be heard, but like someone who finally knew the value of her voice. I started by telling the truth. A few years ago, I was scrubbing floors for a family who said I couldn't even spell the word university. A few people in the audience smiled softly, surprised by my honesty. I continued, but while I cleaned their house, I was also studying late at night, dreaming of a world where technology helped everyone, not just the privileged. I explained how my algorithm worked, how it helped spot biased patterns in law enforcement tools, how real people, Black men and women, just like me and my brother, were being misidentified and wrongfully accused because of flawed systems, and how we had the power, through data and truth, to fix it. When I finished, there was a pause, a heartbeat of silence that felt like forever. Then came the sound I'll never forget. Applause. Loud, steady, growing stronger by the second. People stood. They clapped with their whole hearts. I saw some wiping tears. I stood there, holding back my own, barely breathing. And then something happened that I never expected. From the front row, a man stood up. I recognized him immediately. It was the President of the United States. He walked up the steps toward me. I froze. My throat went dry. He approached me slowly, then extended his arms and hugged me right there on live television. Cameras flashed. The room fell silent again. He stepped back and looked at the crowd, then at me. "This nation owes her everything," he said. "Not just because she's brilliant, but because she never gave up." She reminded us of what's possible when someone refuses to stay in the box the world puts them in. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. In that moment, everything I had ever fought for, every long night, every moment of pain and doubt, had led to this. I was no longer just a girl who had survived. I was a woman who had changed something. Somewhere in a mansion in Connecticut, the Lawrences were probably watching. Maybe Ashley saw it while flipping through channels. Maybe Matthew heard my name and paused, wondering if it was the same girl he used to mock over dinner. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want an apology. All I wanted was for them to see me now, not through pity or surprise, but with the quiet shock of knowing they had been wrong. When I left the stage, my phone was already buzzing. Tyrese had texted me 100 times. "You did it, sis. I saw you on TV. They clapped so loud." I smiled through tears. He had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room, still in my blazer, watching the replay of the moment again and again, not out of vanity, but because I needed to believe it really happened. Because I need to say, there were still parts of me that remembered the girl behind the curtain, holding a tray of tea, afraid to speak. But now, that girl was gone. The climax of my story wasn't just about the applause or the president's hug. It was about the shift, the recognition, the realization that I was never small. I was just waiting for the world to catch up. And now, it had. After the symposium, everything changed, but not in the flashy, overnight success kind of way people imagine. Yes, the media called. Yes, I did interviews. Yes, my face was on the homepage of websites I used to scroll through during my 10-minute lunch breaks. But the real change happened inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't have to shrink to make others comfortable. I didn't have to hide my past, my struggle, or my story. I could own it, all of it. That moment on stage didn't erase the years of pain or struggle. It didn't make up for the times I cried on the bathroom floor after being humiliated at work, or for the nights I skipped meals so Tyrese could eat. But it did something more powerful. It gave those moments purpose. It turned them into fuel. It gave me a platform, and I decided I wasn't going to waste it. A few months later, I launched my own nonprofit organization, Code for Justice. Our mission was simple: to teach data literacy and tech skills to women in low-income jobs. I wanted to reach the girls scrubbing toilets in office buildings after hours, the waitresses getting yelled at by customers, the single moms who were told their dreams didn't matter anymore. I wanted them to know that their story didn't have to end in survival. It could start there and grow into something incredible. The first woman who walked into our program was named Tanya. She was 38, a hotel janitor, and she hadn't touched a computer since high school. She was nervous, unsure if she could learn coding at her age. I saw myself in her, tired, strong, uncertain. By the end of our 12-week course, Tanya had built her own website and was applying for remote tech jobs. The day she got hired by a small startup, she cried into my shoulder and said, "You didn't just teach me code. You reminded me I was worth more." That's when I realized this was my life's work. Tyrese, now 16, had grown into a thoughtful, determined young man. He had always been smart, but now he had something I didn't at his age: stability. He was excelling in school and already talking about starting a robotics club. One night, as we washed dishes together, he looked at me and said, "When I was little, I thought you were a superhero. Now I know I was right." We both laughed, but I couldn't stop the tears from welling up. Not sad tears, proud ones, grateful ones, because we had made it out, together. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was handwritten on thick paper. The return address said, Lawrence, Residence. I sat on my couch, turning the envelope over in my hands for a long time before opening it. It was from Ashley. She wrote, "I saw you on TV. I almost didn't believe it was you. I've thought about you a lot since we were kids. I don't expect you to forgive me for how we treated you, but I want you to know that watching you speak, watching the world listen to you, it changed me. You changed me. If you ever want to talk, I'd like the chance to say these things in person. I didn't write back, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need closure from her. I had already found it in my own life, in my work, in the hundreds of women like Tanya, who walked into my classroom with doubt and walked out with purpose. Ashley's letter went into a drawer, along with my scholarship letter and the note Tyrese wrote me in 4th grade that said, "My sister is going to be a doctor." It was a reminder that no one, not even those who laughed the loudest, had the final word on my life. The media eventually moved on, as they always do. The spotlight faded, but I was still here, still showing up every day. I wasn't chasing headlines. I was building futures. And every so often, I'd get stopped at the grocery store by someone who said, "Aren't you the woman who built the bias algorithm?" I'd smile and say yes, but I always followed it with, "I'm also a teacher now," because that was what truly mattered to me, being the person I once needed. When I think about that moment on stage, the president's hug, the applause, I don't see myself as someone who got lucky. I see myself as someone who refused to stay quiet, someone who kept going when no one was clapping, someone who believed, even when she was told she couldn't spell the word university. That's the lesson I want every girl to know. Your story doesn't end with what they say about you. It begins with what you choose to believe about yourself. I didn't rise because someone gave me a chance. I rose because I took one. They laughed when I served their tea, but they stared when I stood on that stage. And I stood tall.